Hello, everyone taking part in the meeting today. My name is Alexandra Tsvetkova, and together with Georgina Humphries, we are to explain to you today briefly about our TREIO project, what type of materials we have created, and what type of tools we have created for professionals working in the EIO domain. But we'll also try to give you a bit of a context to all this, just to make sure that you understand whether and how all these materials and tools are related to the ongoing digitalization initiatives. Before we go, this is just a quick announcement on the housekeeping rules today. So this is a meeting that is to be recorded for your further reference. Within the end of the week, you will receive both the recording and the presentation from today's meeting, along with complimentary access to all the tools that we are going to present today. In case you are to comment on what you hear, you're interested to know more about certain topics or certain features that we are going to present today, you can raise your hand and share your comment to the group. Or if you, in case you don't like your audio or video to be recorded, you can just put your comments in the chat, and together with Georgina, we will take over that comment, read it to the audience, and proceed with an answer. We already have quite a big number of questions coming from the registration forms. So no matter of your comments and questions in this particular session, we'll also try to cover for those, just to make sure that we won't miss something. But we have already integrated the answers to these comments to the presentation today, just to make sure that you have all the sufficient details with regards to the tool that we are exploring. So let us start. This is the agenda for the day. So as already mentioned, we'll go briefly through the European initiatives on digitalization of judicial cooperation, exchanges and procedures. Then Georgina will cover for the e-learning course that we have prepared on EIO exchanges and the use of the dedicated system for such exchanges. And then I will continue with an online tool that you can explore further with regards to the EIO business flow and how to learn more about this dedicated system. And at the very end, we'll also cover for these pertinent questions that you may have, but also those coming from the registration forms. And we'll also present you with some information on how to access the tools that we are presenting. So let's start from the very beginning. I believe that some of you may already know, but nevertheless, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page today. So going back a little, you know, there are a number of initiatives on digitalization undertaken at EU level in the past years, and a number of them refer to the possibilities for exchanging information, documents, and evidences in cross-border transactions for the purposes of judicial cooperation. And these are the main activities that takes place in the cross-border judicial activities nowadays. In practice, it all started back in 2010, when a number of member states initiated the development of a secure communication channel for data exchanges. And by the time that project was completed in 2016, this was already known as the eCodex system, and it showed such prospects that there were a number of spin-off projects and different initiatives coming out of it, working on different use cases in judicial cooperation. Different member states after that joined this project, joined the communication over this secure channel. And what's most important, the Commission appreciated the these developments, the services provided by the member states for their peer competent authorities. And after several years of negotiations, the regulation on the Codex system was adopted in 2022. And this regulation defines different roles, responsibilities, and the overall legal framework for operating the e-Codex system, making it officially the European secure channel for exchange of data and documents for the purposes of judicial cooperation. Following the success of the original project, as I said, the Commission really evaluated the potential future and expansion of such a infrastructure, and they, in relation to that, they initiated the development of the so-called eEDES digital exchange system, also known today as reference implementation software. So the purpose of that system was to provide for a common tool for all member states to exchange requests under different judicial cooperation instruments. And the system was decided to be piloted in the context of the European Investigation Order, the mutual legal assistance forms, and interception of telecommunication notifications. Considering that, back in 2016, the EIO directive was not yet into application, and it was coming on the horizon. So this was a good moment to pilot on such a tool. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 crisis, a number of delays were happened, and both on the Commission and the member state side. And the system was launched just in May 2022, with quite a big delay from the original plans. And to date, only 11 member states has joined this platform in a piloting mode. This means that the eEDES system is not deployed nationwide, but there are a number of competent authorities in each of these states that you see on the screen, which have deployed the eEDES system in one way or another, and are currently exchanging EIOs in a digital format. When I say one way or another, this means that there are different options on how to use the system. It could be as a standalone solution, meaning that it's completely independent from all other systems on national level, or it could be integrated with a national case management system, but there also could be a hybrid option somewhere in between. I'm not going to speak more on the technical aspects. I think this is more than enough, and you get the main picture of the main systems that concerns our webinar today. However, as usual, when it comes to such changes, there are also accompanying changes on the legal side. And the most important change that happened recently is the adoption of the regulation on digitalization of judicial cooperation and access to justice in cross-border civil, commercial, and criminal cases. This regulation is part of a legislative proposal package adopted by the Commission 2 years earlier. It's already in force. It was finally adopted in December 2023. It's already in force, and it will apply from 1st of May 2025. This new regulation brings new rules regarding different forms of electronic communication. So it covers not only the electronic communication between natural and legal persons or their representatives and the respective competent authorities, but it also provides for new rules when using video conferencing or other distance communication technologies in oral hearings. It covers for the recognition of documents with electronic signature and seals. It comments on the different forms of payment of fees through electronic means, and so on. What's most important in the context of the EIO is that this regulation further enhance the digitalization processes for a number of judicial cooperation tools, including amending 8 legislative acts in the judicial cooperation domain. The biggest difference that is to come is that, as I said, the regulation prescribes that the communication over a total of 24 different legislative instruments should be done in a digitalized format via a secure communication channel, being the eCodex system. And this digital exchange and communication will become mandatory from a point of time in the near future for all these 24 legislative instruments. The regulation also speaks about the reference implementation software that I mentioned just before as an option for the member states to use the software developed by the Commission for the purposes of these exchanges instead of a national solution. But they could also decide to strategize on developing a national system, and this is their right. So just to sum up, the use of the eCodex system will become mandatory for all these tools that I'm about to show you. And but the exact software through which this could be done is an option left to the member states. They could use the reference implementation provided by the Commission or design a special national solution. Considering quite the big number of legislative instruments to be digitalized following the adoption of this regulation, it's obvious that it cannot happen at once. So there is a roadmap developed from the Commission side on a step-by-step approach digitalizing these legislative instruments in the so-called batches. So the first time when the use of eCodex will become mandatory, it will be with the service of documents and taking of evidence for civil and commercial cases in 2025. And then gradually, both the legislation in terms of implementing acts and the upgrades of the eEDES system provided by the Commission will happen over time until 2031, so that each of these instruments could be facilitated in terms of exchanges and delivery of data and documents through electronic means. And for the purposes of the European Investigation Order, this mandatory usage of eCodex and the digitalization of the exchange will take place in 2028. In a bit of a technical slide, here I'm just going to show you the overall architecture of this communication. So imagine that you are representing the competent authority to the very right side of the screen that I'm showing. And if your competent authority have opted to use the reference implementation software, what you should know is that it communicates directly through an eCodex communication point, through the eCodex communication channel, to a similar instance in the on the other side in the respective competent authority that is receiving or issuing the EIO, depending on the position taken in the exchange. In case that competent authority on the other side has also opted for the use of the reference implementation software, you will all see one and the same, and the system will look exactly like this. And what is more important, that every time when the system is upgraded for a different judicial cooperation instruments following the roadmap that I showed you, the main framework of the system will remain the same, just as the different features and functionalities, like the main features and functionalities it integrates. So the e-signing of documents, the auto-translation, which I will mention further later on, as well as the overall interface, how user-friendly it is, and what's the general feel and touch when playing with the system will remain the same. The only thing that will change is when you initiate a request under a specific judicial cooperation instrument, then there will be different forms, different communication actions that you can perform following what is prescribed in the respective legislative act governing this instrument. So you don't need to bother with the technicalities here. What you need to remember is that it is all happening over a secure channel that was explicitly designed for the purposes of judiciary by judicial authorities. It is currently maintained and supported by the European agencies. And on the user side, this is how the system looks, and the overall look and feel won't change over time with all the upgrades coming in with the different judicial cooperation instruments. Now, why are we talking about all these things, considering we are just representing a project? When TREIO was conceived back in 2019, 2020, we all saw these developments coming, and we have decided to address them from two different perspectives. On one side, we are looking for a way to kind of minimize the differences in implementation that came with the application of the EIO directive. So trying to find a way to align how member states implement the EIO exchanges. And the other perspective was, okay, there is a new system coming up on the horizon. We need to find a way to train people on how to use that system. With these two ideas in mind, we started working on a person-to-person training framework. And we have designed training materials that covers the legal, the business aspects of the EIO exchange, but also incorporating in themselves guidelines on how to use the eEDES system, depending on the stage and the phase of the exchange that is contextualized in the materials for that particular chapter or for that particular section. All these materials provide for national adaptations, meaning that they could be adjusted depending on the case law, depending on the differences in the workflow, in the differences of the competencies, depending on which is the competent authority and how the competencies are distributed to national level, and so on. And all these materials have been translated in 16 different languages on top of the original English set. Once the materials were developed, we started providing for a number of train-the-train activities, online trainings direct to professionals in the different member states, and also a number of awareness activities, such as this webinar that we have implemented in the past 2 years. However, we noticed something that is highly linked to the different stages of adopting the eEDES and the different strategies the member state have in this adoption process. So in reality, while the framework of the trainings were common, we implemented different type of training activities. And we also noted that sometimes these person-to-person trainings are not that efficient or not sufficient long-term, because we also had in the process member states that opted for training early on, but never reached the point of deploying the system. So a year later, 2 years later, it's obvious that the professionals have already forgotten what they have learned in these trainings, and they needed a way to remind themselves of the different steps on using the system. And they also needed an independent environment that they could use while their national solution is in development, or while the national eEDES instance is deployed. And this is how we end up with the TREIO eLearning course and the TREIO eEDES simulator that we are going to present today. I'm not going to go into further details here. There is a special section dedicated to each of these tools. What I want to mention as a final step of our project is the development of the so-called TREIO Toolkit, where we are trying to combine all these tools that have been developed and to provide in different sets and to provide specific guidelines that could be used by 3 different audiences: professionals like yourself that are interested in how to use the system, that are interested in different EIO aspects if they don't have sufficient professional experience in that field. But then we also have the perspective of the trainer or the perspective of the competent authority, which may have different ideas on how to use these tools. And these are also things that we are going to touch upon briefly when Georgina is presenting the eLearning course. So I'm now giving her the word to proceed with this presentation of the course.
Thank you, Alex. So yes, as Alex has mentioned, I will cover some of the aspects of the e-learning and specifically also the use of the TREIO eEDES simulator within the e-learning as well. We have 3 critical aspects of the TREIO online training. Excuse me a second. And one of them is the e-learning platform, which has been set up to basically house the training. We have the self-paced training itself, so the modules of content, for example. We have select language versions, and we have complement to that the TREIO eEDES simulator, which provides for a training environment for real-time experience on learning how to use eEDES and specific EIO workflows, etc. So all in all of those provide the TREIO online training and a tool package for practitioners to utilize to gain awareness about the EIO and eEDES. We have several use cases for the TREIO training, and there are 2 distinct packages. One is a full package and the other is an eEDES package. The full package contains information on the EIO directive, EIO form, and also how to use eEDES. And the eEDES package includes just information solely on how to use eEDES in the context of the EIO workflow. We've also realised, due to the modalities, that there is a need for refresher training. So the full version of the course can be used for professionals to either be instructed or self-evaluate on their awareness and knowledge of topics and kind of refresh their memory or acquire knowledge in areas maybe that they haven't touched upon in recent days or need some extra information to facilitate their role. There are several benefits we feel of the TREIO online training. Well, the most obvious being increased awareness of the EIO directive, EIO form, and eEDES, including its use and benefits for transfer and digital evidences. However, there are other benefits, including that it's a user-centered learning approach with active learning styles, and there is no instructor required. So the content is self-paced, meaning participants can control their own study time. Also allowing for greater flexibility and accessibility by a variety of professionals, and to help also increase the professionals' confidence in using the eEDES platform through the simulated use using the TREIO eEDES simulator. We have and still have several aims and objectives. The most prominent being that everyone have a structured knowledge of the EIO directive and EIO procedures, being able to identify investigative measures, but also to be able to overcome any typical difficulties that may be encountered in the application of an EIO, to identify the procedures for transmission and receipt, and specifically learning how to use eEDES in those activities through the use of the TREIO eEDES simulator. And all in all, we hope that participants at the end will have obtained a well-rounded knowledge on all things EIO, so whether it be legislation, it's near the end of the day. So whether it be legislation, business, workflow, or the use of eEDES and its familiarity to the users. The e-learning content is, as I said, online. It's self-paced. Each package has a duration. The full package has a duration of 1 week. And the eEDES package has a duration of 2 to 3 days. That is not to say it will take you a full week or 2 to 3 days. In actual fact, there's just a time allotted for a slower paced learning, also some breaks, some practical exercises and repetition. And it allows for you to take time out and come back to it in a couple of hours' time or next day. So it shouldn't necessarily take you 1 week. The master copy is in English, and there are select language translations of the course materials as well, and we targeted multiple stakeholders. So this course is an all-in-one course. It's meant to be for all stakeholders, whether you be a judge, a prosecutor, clerk, administrator, and anything in between, handling EIOs in the eEDES platform. The training consists of 5 modules, and that is the same for both packages. However, the eEDES package does contain fewer number of lessons because it just solely focuses on the use of eEDES and not everything EIO around it. We have some take-home tasks, which are essentially exercises to perform. Here we've just listed 3 topics, but actually there are 10 exercises, which I will come to later. And then we have the TREIO eEDES simulator, which is basically the thread through all of the modules and all of the exercises. And we have a variety of content in the training. We have obviously a collection of theory and practice. Obviously there is legal materials in there, case law and procedures. So a lot of that is textual based, but we have tried to in places provide visual aids to support with that. We also have some short videos, some demonstrations. We have some embedded simulations, which are different from the TREIO eEDES simulator itself. And we have exercise, which I mentioned before. And also we have self-evaluation points as well. So we have quizzes, for example, throughout different modules and exercises. And we also have the end examinations. So just to cover a couple of items here, we'll go through these quite briefly, but as you can see, there is text content in the e-learning. We have graphics as well, and in places we have animations that are either in a kind of a clickable element or in short video format like you see here. All videos include subtitles. The short videos sometimes include sound, but longer videos don't include sound. We're mindful that you might be in an office environment when you are undertaking the training, so sound is not an option potentially. So we have removed that and included subtitling instead. We have quizzes, as you can see here, and the exam follows a similar format so that it's familiar to the users by the end of the training. We have some demonstrations, which you can see here are also in video format, so have subtitling, but they are broken down into chunks, so can be paused, slowed down, or repeated, for example, and professionals are encouraged to follow along using the TREIO eEDES simulator as well. And here it's a short demonstration. We won't go through all the demo, but we will show a snippet of it. As you can see here, we start to see that there are some subtitling. Here it's in English, but in the select languages, it appears as the language version. We have some short subtitling, and also there are longer subtitling, depending on what we are trying to highlight to you. And we have these chunks that I mentioned that the demonstrations are split into. And these chunks are generally the sections or specific information that we think you should be aware of. Sometimes there might be additional information, as you can see on the right-hand side, this little document plus symbol. And here we include additional information about specific items that are important and you should be aware of. So in this case, how to search for a competent authority, but it could be something else like how to use translations or how to perform translations or various other aspects that we feel are important. And then I said we had some embedded simulations, which are different from the TREIO eEDES simulator itself. As you can see here, in this example, we are starting a new request for an ITN in this case, and this is embedded in the course itself, as you can see from the slideshow. And we click on each of the elements available to us and where we are directed. There is no textual input, so we have done some of that for you, but you're able to click on and walk through the task as if you were in eEDES as well. Complementary to this, we recommend that everyone, having gone through this, also go to the TREIO eEDES simulator and follow the task again, and actually physically type in some of the text content as well. And then I mentioned we had some practical exercises. We have a minimum set. You saw there were 3 bullet points before, but I mentioned there are 10 exercises in total. Each of those exercises has a set of information. It has a scenario, it has a task, and the first example in the exercise will have a list of instructions. So we will guide you and say, please do A, B, C, D, E. However, in the second extension task, you'll just be given a new scenario and a new task, which is identical to the first one, but without guided instructions, and be expected to use the TREIO eEDES simulator to perform the tasks. We can see this in the next slide. We have another scenario, another task with that scenario, and you're to sign into the TREIO eEDES simulator and perform the same actions. Obviously, you have the previous task, which was guided to help you if you are stuck in any way, shape or form in performing the second task. We have designed the TREIO training for multiple end users, so for all stakeholders. Anyone performing the training will be given access to both packages, so the full package and the eEDES package in a suitable LMS, which we have, as I previously said, set up. All quizzes and the final examination are combined in with the content itself, so there is one package for you to work through. And then the exercises, while they are embedded in the course, we will also provide them separately for ease of access, for if you would like to utilize them with the TREIO eEDES simulator. We have also considered trainers in the approach here. As I mentioned before, it's not instructor-led, but if competent authorities wish to perform the e-learning with a trainer behind, then there is a possibility to do so with the access to not only the packages themselves, but also to the mapping of the content through storyboards, and also to the solutions to the quizzes and examinations. Furthermore, we have considered the competent authorities and how they would need additional materials if to embed this in their own learning management system, or to develop the materials further to a national requirement or context. And in doing so, we've provided the developer files, which include all images, graphics, text, content, etc., and also a mapping exercise in terms of a developer manual, which it allows them to have access to information about how the files are organized from a developer perspective. And now I will hand back over to Alex, who will cover some of the information on the TREIO eEDES simulator.
Thank you, Georgina. So I tried to present you briefly the idea behind the simulator before, without hinting too much. What is it? So let's go into these details. Ideally, when you have face-to-face training environment or an instructor-based type of training, when you support your peers on the job, you're in a situation where each of you would have access to the system via their own profiles, and you'll be able to explore the system together, pairing with another practitioner or with a trainer. So this is how the communication would look like in such a training. And if you want to explore a certain option, the most easiest way to do is just to ask your peer, please help me do this, and it will happen. In an e-learning environment where you have a self-paced training, this is simply not possible, since you are alone there and you're performing all the tasks by yourself. So what we have tried to do is to replace your training partner with the so-called TREIO autoresponder. And in the scenarios that Georgina already mentioned, and I will briefly go through. Now, in all these scenarios, we perform different steps on how to implement a certain stage of the EIO exchange, and depending on the actions taken by the participant in the training, the autoresponder will send specific feedback that will help simulating a real-time exchange. So how close we are to a real-time exchange? This is the biggest question. And we have tried to be as close as possible. So for the purposes of the TREIO project, we have installed a real eCodex communication point that is linked to the real eCodex communication channels. And on our side is the TREIO eEDES simulator. Our simulator is an exact replica of the original eEDES system provided by the Commission, upgraded with some training-related features in the face of the TREIO autoresponder. So all of the TREIO participants, be they part of a training or an awareness event like this one, are provided access to the eEDES TREIO simulator. And all the exchanges they initiate through that software, all the communication they initiate through that software goes straight to the eCodex communication point we have installed, the eCodex communication channel, but instead of going to a real competent authority on the other side, it goes in the other direction towards the TREIO autoresponder. And all this information about the different exercises and how one could switch from one exercise to another, contextualized in the different modules of the training, is provided by the e-learning course. So in reality, every time when you work with the eEDES simulator and you send notifications, messages, or exchanges to the TREIO autoresponder, you will receive confirmations of the data sent. And these type of confirmations are also reconfirmed through the eCodex communication channel, providing an environment that is as close as possible to the real use of the system. These 10 scenarios that Georgina mentioned have tried to cover for all the main stages in the EIO exchanges, and you can judge that from the title. 7 of these scenarios cover for actions undertaken by the issuing authority, and the last 3 cover for actions undertaken by the executing authority. Each of these scenarios follows an if-then behavior, meaning that when you have the scenario with the instructions, it gives you for a number of states to undertake. And then every time when you perform that step, the autoresponder reacts and feeds you with the specific information. So for example, let's take one example of issuing an EIO. So if you go to scenario 7, for example, you issue an EIO, but following the instructions, we give you such a sequence of actions that will lead to the rejection of that EIO. When you send the EIO, the autoresponder recognizes these actions and immediately reject the EIO. So when you're on the issuing side, you see how this in a simultaneous fashion, you see what happens if your EIO is rejected and what are the follow-up steps that you can perform in this regard through the system. So all of these scenarios lead you through a learning by doing path to familiarize yourself with the different options provided by the system. And then you'll be able to move along and perform all these stages of the EIO exchange by yourself. Now, depending on the scenario that you'd like to implement, For example, if you'd like to issue an EIO, you act upon, you enter the eEDES simulator and you assume the role of the issuing state. And as you see on the left side here on the screen, the issuing state is the eEDES simulator. In order to simulate feedback from the autoresponder, you need to send your EIO not to a random competent authority in the Netherlands or in Portugal, but you need to find from the list of executing state the TREIO autoresponder at the very bottom of the list and send your request to the autoresponder. Vice versa, if you want to simulate different actions on the receiving side, you enter the simulator assuming the role of the executing state. And in order to act upon a received an EIO, you need to first receive it. So you ask the TREIO autoresponder to send you an EIO, which will be different depending on the scenario that you want to exercise. And then you see it received in the eEDES simulator, and then you perform the different actions from the point of the executing institution. Now, these are the very basics of this architecture that we came with, trying to design as close to real-time training as possible. Now, each of you will receive complimentary access to both the e-learning course and the eEDES simulator, meaning that you'll be able to go to the address showed on the screen, and using the access details that we will send you, you can log in and literally play, exercise with the eEDES simulator on your own. So the username that you receive will look like something like, so it will look like this one. So we sign in. Sorry for this. Let's use it again. So we sign in, and what you see here is the exact replica of the original system of the Commission. The only way to recognize that this is not the system of the Commission is this little icon here, TREIO eEDES simulator, and the presence of the TREIO autoresponder among the list of executing states. So here you see your name in a real-time environment, in real-life environment, you see exactly your name, but here you see the username. And then if you go to your profile, you see all the roles you have in the system. Again, in real life, the roles will be assigned to you from your competent authority depending on the competencies you have in the EIO workflow. But here, for training purposes, we give you all rights: authoring an EIO, reviewing an EIO, signing an EIO, sending an EIO, and so on, so that you can explore all these options on your own. Currently, I have set up the system in English, but you can opt to change the language in any other you feel comfortable with, including your native language. For example, I'm Bulgarian. I'll just switch to Bulgarian, and then you see that everything changes and all the notifications, statuses, messages, menus, and everything changes into Bulgarian. I'll just go back to English for the purposes of this presentation. So when you are interested to initiate a new request, you go to the Start New Request button. You have the option to select the type of request depending on the different judicial cooperation instruments listed there. Currently, the system, as already mentioned, is developed for the purposes of EIO exchanges, MLA exchanges, and ITN exchanges. But with the gradual advancement of the system, all the other judicial cooperation instruments will appear here. And depending on your competencies, you will see all those that are linked to your profile. So let's say we initiate an EIO, and let's decide to test it with a dummy subject. In reality, here we'll write down all the important aspects that will make sense to the other side in order to easily recognize what your request would be. So we continue with creating our EIO draft. This means that we have now initiated an EIO and we need to start filling our Annex A. But before we go to Annex A, I want to show you two important features. So first, we have the overview dashboard here that presents in a brief everything that happens with your particular request. So now you're acting on the issuing side. So you see the eEDES simulator as the issuing state. In order to trigger response from the autoresponder, you need to go to the, when you select the executing state, we need to go down to the list and select TREIO autoresponder. Every time when the status of the case changes, there will be some notification in this area, and I will go to a received request later on to show you how this happened. Here you can see all the users from your competent authority assigned to the case, in case there are more than one. And with the development of the EIO case, you'll see all the documents attached here and all the further details regarding the exchange. Another important feature is the event and message timeline. And here you can see all the notification that in a chronological order that shows what actually happened with this request. Every time when you see, when you receive, you perform a key action of the workflow. Every time when you receive a communication message or response to the EIO, every time when you create a specific document within the system, this will be reflected here in the timeline. Now let's go to Annex A. Annex A follows exactly the forms prescribed by the EIO directive with one major difference. In the original forms in the EIO directive, we don't have mandatory fields. We know from practice what is important and what is mandatory in order for the EIO exchange to be processed as swiftly as possible, but we don't have mandatory fields per se. Now here in the system, these most important parts are mapped as mandatory. So not to miss anything before you send your EIO. And while going through one section to the next, you can also perform different validation checks that will show you whether you have missed a mandatory field or not. And these sections are linked, the mandatory fields are interlinked. So every time when you choose a specific option in, let's say, section F, it could open another mandatory option in section H, for example, depending on these interlinks. And you can perform a validation check while drafting Annex A and any other document after that, part of the process. So here now you see all these sections in red shows you that there is a mandatory field that is not yet completed. So if you go to section F, for example, you see which is the part that you need to act upon being highlighted in red. There are also other supporting features like that, including the automated translation. So automated translation is again provided in all European languages. And the purpose is to support you in urgent situations or for operational purposes to help you with your work process. But it's very important. This automated translation does not substitute the official translations as required by the directive. So in order to speed up the process, you may perform an automated translation of the full field Annex A, or just for a particular section or field within the annex. But as I said, this does not substitute the official translation. The official translation still needs to be performed depending on the languages that the receiving side or the other side, depending on the type of exchange, acknowledges, and so on. Now here, depending on the stage of the exchange, different actions could be performed. We are here in this example are at the very beginning of the process, and the only thing, if you go to the workflow button, the only thing that you can do at this stage is just to complete Annex A in order to proceed further with its exchange. However, if we go to an already received request, let's try this one. Okay, this is a good example, more or less, a simple but good example. So this is an already received EIO. And in order to act upon it on the executing side, it was triggered from the autoresponder. The autoresponder plays the role of the issuing state, and now you are acting on the executing side, just as I explained earlier. And here you can see how the status of the case changes. So Annex A was issued, and then there was a request for additional information. If Annex B is issued afterwards, this will change as well. And then we have different flags for the different stages of the exchange. And here, as I mentioned before, you see all the documents attached to the exchange and all the applicable deadlines in this regard. You are in a position to review the different annexes and the different communication messages exchanged. And if you go to the event and message timeline, you already see that there is a notification with regards to the request for additional information that is part of this timeline. There are also a number of support features in the process regarding uploading new documents, uploading translations, commenting, downloading, and so on. These are all visible from the user manual that is part of the e-learning course. And it applies to both TREIO system and the TREIO eEDES simulator that will give you access to. I want to point your attention to the workflow. As mentioned, we are now in a different stage of the EIO exchange. So now the actions that you can perform here are completely different from the one that we saw just before. And you have much more options to act upon, considering the stage that you are currently in. I'm not going to go into any further details. This is not supposed to be an EIO training. I just want to show you some of the other support features that the system provides. For example, if you go to the receive request, there are quite a number of them. And you can apply different search filters and different search options to navigate through all these EIOs that you have received. Every time when you receive or issue a different request, here you can see the type of request that has been received or issued. You can, if you have the rights to, you can invite further colleagues to join. And then there is always the status of the case here, which varies depending on the stage and the actions taken upon the exchange. Just to illustrate what I said, if you go here to drafts, you see that we have different types of requests here in the draft section, MLA, EIO, and if it had initiated ITN, it will show ITN here. And see how different the status is, considering we are in the draft version. Every time when you reach a key section into Annex A, for example, as part of your draft, for example, if you reach section L or K, the draft here the draft status here will change to a draft at section L or something like that. Just another support feature here. If you go to the received request, you also have this deadline dashboard where you can see all the deadlines related to the exchanges that you have received and what is the expected response from your side and by when, which I believe is rather important when you're trying to plan your day-to-day activities. As I said, I'm not going to go any further. I will go back to my presentation just to finish on the topic that have been planned for today. As mentioned, each of you will receive access to the e-learning course and the TREIO eEDES simulator. However, depending on the role that you're playing in your institution or on your professional interest, there may be other materials that you might be interested in. So if you go to the TREIO website, the link that you see here on the screen, there is a toolkit section that is now a bit empty, but we are to gradually upload information there in the next 2 weeks. And you will find there at the very end all the training materials that we have created, including in their language versions, all the training guidelines and all the different documents that we have designed for the purposes, also for the purposes of e-learning and the eEDES simulator and so on. And these different sets that Georgina commented on, one for professionals, one for trainers, and one for competent authorities, will also be there. But since you're part of our webinar series, once we have completed the section, you also receive a notification over email, and you'll be able to go on the website and pick on the pieces that you find most relevant to you. Now, you're free to share the recordings from today, this presentation, with your colleagues, if they might find this information useful, or if they are willing to sign up for accessing these tools just like you did. So in order to do so, they need to go to the link showed on the screen and then request access to the tools. It is a rather simple form. It takes a couple of days to provide the access, but it will reach the person interested. And if there is any problem in the correspondence, they may always reach us at office by using office@treio.eu for any matter or any question regarding the use of the tools. Now, one important aspect that concerns both you receiving complimentary access and anyone else who might request for the access to these tools. At the very beginning, each of you receive one and the same username and password for all the tools that we provide. And then when you access the e-learning course, you'll be asked for security reasons to change your password with the new one and use the new one further on solely for the purposes of the e-learning course. For all the other instruments, the eEDES simulator, the TREIO autoresponder, the original password given to you will remain in usage. This sometimes creates confusion. This is why we spent time on explaining this, just to make sure that we are all aware of this little peculiarity. So in terms of main content, this is all from us. And now it's time for your questions, if you have any, considering both the content that we presented, the tool that we presented, or any other matter that is related to this topic.
Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any questions in the chat, but maybe if you would like, you can raise your hand and speak your questions. Otherwise, if you don't want to be heard on the recording, then please post them in the chat and Alex or I will voice them for you. I'll give you a few moments to see if there's any that appear in the chat. Otherwise, we have a few questions that we can cover from the registered interest? Okay, then there are no questions in the chat, so we will just cover a few items from the registered interest. I think we have quite exhaustively covered, Alex, the questions from the registered participants, but I think many of the questions that we have received for these events have surrounded about the access to the tools, which Alex has just gone over with you. So just to reiterate, we have the form online, which you will be given the link to after this when you're provided the video and all information, so you can refer back to it. You don't need to scribble it down right now. And you can fill in that form, your colleagues can fill in that form, but you will be provided access complimentary out of the box by the end of the week anyway. So that link is just for your colleagues if they would like to sign up. For those who work with an EIO on a daily basis or deliver trainings, then I think we have covered the major points around the fact that we have delivered person-to-person trainings. So there will be materials for those in different select languages as well. And that includes a variety of materials from slides to guidance materials and other aspects. We have the e-learning, which will be available to everyone as well. And all of these materials will be given, you will be given access to and pointed in the correct direction to access each of the materials respectively. We've been asked previously if a member state can be involved in the TREIO project, specifically participating in the trainings that we've delivered. As Alex mentioned, we are at the very end of the project, so unfortunately there is no more in-person trainings or piloting of the e-learning, but both, as I have just mentioned, would be available and accessible to your colleagues through that form and to yourselves at the end of the week. If you are responsible for the deployment of eEDES or other aspects related to eEDES in terms of training activities, and you're interested in continuous use for the TREIO EDS simulator in the training context, then you will be provided access to that also with the e-learning and the materials from the person-to-person trainings. And I think we've covered a lot on the modalities of the implementation, which we probably don't need to go over. But if there are any other questions, or Alex, you have any further input, then please let us know. We are here to answer any questions you may have.
Well, we may go back to some of the questions asked in previous webinars with regard, for example, the involvement of Eurojust. As far as we are aware, there is a separate role to be dedicated to Eurojust representatives, and the Commission is currently implementing those features. And eventually, Eurojust representative could become part of the platform and support the EIO exchanges. There was a question regarding the how to find the proper competent authority in light of the current use of the EGN Atlas. In fact, currently in the system, there is only a reference to the EGN Atlas. So you go out of the system, you look at the Atlas, find the appropriate competent authority, and you go back to the system, selecting it during your EIO workflow. But the Commission is also working on automating this process, integrating some features of the EGN Atlas within the system. So this is a further possibility for development that is yet to come. There was one question regarding the size of the documents that could be exchanged, considering there are options for attachments of different documents to the EIO that is exchanged over the system. In reality, there is a limitation in terms of the size of the documents that comes from the original eCodex infrastructure. So whenever the size allowance changes for the eCodex infrastructure, it will automatically change for the purposes of the eEDES system. But the system itself allows for the upload of different type of documents, like the most common, the formats in Word, in PDF, for example, and so on. And it also allows for the upload of audio and video files, of course, to the size allowed. What else do I have in my notes? So we already made it quite clear that this is not the official national system, no matter the member state that we are discussing. This is just a training environment that replicates how the original system looks. So ideally, when you start using eEDES for your professional needs, in a real life situation, you will be given access to that instance from your competent authority. But for the purposes of these training activities that we just mentioned, you can just register. We are the one responsible for giving access, and then you're free to use it. Another question was regarding the language of the exchange, but I think we already covered that. In the training environment, you can do whatever you want, but in a real-time, real-life situation, you need to make sure that you comply with the requirements of the directive and the requirements provided by the different authorities to the languages they accept in this official exchange. One important, very operative aspect that we have forgotten to mention is that please remember, when you use the TREIO eEDES simulator, this is a training environment. So even if you're trying to replicate some real cases that you are working on, please avoid putting any real personal information or any confidential information into the system, just to make sure that we don't breach incidentally some rule that could be out there. I think, at least based on my notes, and I think Georgina notes, we have exhausted the comments, the most important comments that came via the registration forms and via other participants. So we go back to you again and urge you once more to raise your questions or comments if you have any. We are a bit over time, but you're still here, which means that we're doing something right. So you still have the option to raise your questions.
Thank you, Alex. I still don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay, in this case, I think we are ready to complete the session today. This is not the end of the conversation. So you're free to write us over email, office@treio.eu, in case you have any questions regarding the activities that we presented today, or any question regarding the use of these materials once and these tools once you reach that stage. Also, if you are acting from the position of a trainer, or you are assigned by a competent authority to take certain actions to distribute this knowledge to other professionals in your domain, you can always refer to us and ask for support with regards to the tools and materials we offer. So again, thank you for signing up for this webinar. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening until the very end. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the week. By the end of the week, we also share with you all the materials just as promised. So please be patient with us. Thank you once more, and have a nice day.